Three go mental. 1, 2, 3, ladies and gentlemen, make some noise. Please welcome to the stage, Aamer Anwer.
Thank you. I feel like I'm a member of One Direction with that applause. I also want to thank the organizers for the invite today and what is an extremely, let's put it this way, I'm extremely honored that we're all here today to represent a fantastic woman, Margaret MacDonald, who will be smiling down on us. Now, I was asked to pick a topic to speak about, one topic, but I've decided, like many others, to pick everything I can possibly and speak about it in the 10 minutes that I have. And I've heard quite a lot of what's been said already, and a lot of my lines have already been stolen. But I want to start by talking about the rise of UKIP in British politics, because many commentators, and it's been frustrating probably for everybody in this room watching over the last week or so, the commentators, the armchair spectators, the politicians, the pundits, the newspaper editors, the columnists, who want to explain the rise of UKIP in British politics by blaming immigrants. But the real reason for the rise of the far right, because that's exactly what they are, the rise of the far right, not just in Britain but across Europe, the rise of the far right is a failure of Westminster in this country to take on the racist arguments of what I call the BNP in blazers, because that's exactly what the UKIP party represent today. And I was speaking to my dad last week, and I didn't naturally come to wanting to vote for independence. I was born and brought up in Liverpool. And I was speaking to my dad last week, mum and dad who live in Liverpool, and my dad arrived in the 50s, and he told me about the signs, which many of you will, your parents will have told you about, the signs that greeted him as he looked for accommodation with no Irish, no dogs, no blacks. Now, fortunately, we no longer have those signs in this country, but we do have political leaders such as Nigel Farage worrying about Romanians moving in next door. We do, once again, have a media that is comfortable with giving a racist party a platform, even though it didn't have a single seat in Westminster. And it seems like generations ago, I remember when Nick Griffin was invited onto Question Time, when there were thousands of people on the street, thousands of complaints of people asking the question why it was that we were giving a platform to the far right, to a fascist, onto Question Time. Yet it seems as though when you watch Question Time now, over the course of the last year, you wonder why is Nigel Farage is not on the programme. And not a single seat in Westminster, yet they have been represented more time than any other political party. And when it comes down to UKIP talking about foreigners, one little thing strikes me. I would like to see UKIP try and run, for instance, the National Health Service without overseas doctors, without nurses, when you consider that 1/4 of the National Health Service is run by people who are foreign-born. The system would come to its knees. And of course, Nigel Farage and the rest of the Westminster parties don't want to talk about the people who do bleed this country dry, those people who don't work, the people who dodge paying tax, the people who can jet set around the world and who fast-track immigration crews and illegally avoid tax by stashing their cash in tax havens abroad. Yet the Prime Minister doesn't want to wage war on these parasites. The media and commentators don't want to wage war on these parasites, and they don't want to blame these individuals for ordinary people losing out through cuts in healthcare and welfare. And of course, there are many arguments for an independent Scotland. And over the course of the last week, we just happened to get another one. And that was, as Jean said, when we saw UKIP win the biggest share of the European vote across the United Kingdom. And I was actually quite astonished. I don't know why I was astonished, but in 25 years of campaigning, what the Labour Party now does shouldn't astonish me anymore. But I was actually quite shocked when I saw the Labour Party celebrating the fact that the SNP had lost a 3rd seat to UKIP, instead of wondering how it was that Labour could lose to UKIP across the United Kingdom. And it's once again proof that no matter how we vote in Scotland, there is another prospect of a racist, right-wing Westminster government ruling over us come the next general election. And when you pick up a copy of the Sunday Herald today and you see the likes of David Coburn, UKIP's MEP, promising to target Mundell's safe, not safe, I don't think anything's safe for the Tories now, but targeting the only Tory seat in Scotland and making Scotland a Tory-free zone, what I'd say is there's a much better way for making Scotland a Tory-free zone. If we vote yes on September the 18th, that's the way. Better Together would like us all to think that we are better together, but there is statistic after statistic that shows we are not better together. And even when you see that beast of the politics, what I prefer to call the failure of politics, Gordon Brown, trolled out to talk about pensions and to talk about how better it would be under Labour and how we're better together, what we should remember is these statistics, that the richest 1,000 people saw their wealth grow from £99 billion to £301 billion in the 9 years that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown ran the government. Research shows that Scotland's poverty is worse than it has been in 30 years. As of last year, 14% of Scots, that's 720,000 people, live in a state of basic deprivation. 40% of those people are in poverty. Of those people in poverty are actually in work. 100,000 Glaswegians use payday loans to meet everyday living expenses. Glasgow has 6 out of 10 of the most deprived areas in the United Kingdom, where some 51% of our children live in poverty. Our elderly are the 4th poorest in Europe. Life expectancy for males in part of Scotland is the worst in Western Europe, and a report by the London School of Economics, hardly an extreme left-wing organisation, the London School of Economics, they say that if we carry on this way, if we carry on with the attacks on welfare, on benefits, the attacks of austerity, what they say is that Britain will reach Victorian-level inequality by 2025. And then when you talk about what we face, if we do vote for independence, what we've been warned about, we'll lose the pound, we're told. Scots are told we'll be stripped of everything from the BBC to the European Union membership. Although I'm not so sure it would be a bad thing losing the BBC, seeing what they've been doing over the course of the last year. And you have that minister, the most Bullingdon of Tory ministers, Osborne, threatening to build a financial Hadrian's Wall to stop us using the pound. But really, if the United Kingdom is a union of equals, how does one side lay exclusive claim to the most obvious symbol of that union, the pound? When they talk about the fact that we'll be expelled from the European Union, we're not seceding from the European Union. We're not saying we're leaving the European Union. We're talking about the United Kingdom breaking up. Scotland leaving the United Kingdom. If it's a union of equals, why is it Scotland that will be expelled from the European Union? And when Gordon Brown and it makes me angry when Gordon Brown and Labour politicians talk about our pensioners, when they patronise our pensioners and talk as though the UK state pension is the gold standard. Look at the gold standard that we have. The United Kingdom has the worst state pension in Europe at just £113.10. The Republic of Ireland has a basic state pension of £180 a week. And when Labour talk about an escape route, a Labour escape route, all that talk about social justice one day, why they even produced a booklet that had a red cover. That made the news because it was red, and we were told that 10 years ago that would have been impossible. But one day, or next time, or next year, or 10 years, is all exactly what it says. It's all talk. Anything has to be better than the decades of austerity that we've been told to expect by Labour and the Tories. And that is what swung it for me. When I look at my 2 young children, aged 6 and 2 years old, I remember growing up in Liverpool and taking it for granted that there would be a job, that there would be education, that my parents could work hard and provide everything for me and my sister. Yet I have no guarantee that my children's lives will be better. But in fact, what I look at is the abyss and realize that things will get worse for them, whether it comes onto the question of racism, when it comes onto the question of education, welfare, war, whatever issue you want to pick. I have to say that in the United Kingdom, things will get worse if we vote no come September the 18th. I have to say this as well, that we have dreaded the result of a general election every 5 years. The bookies always speculate on who's going to win the general election, but in Scotland it's always clear who the losers are going to be. The losers are always the same people: the pensioners, the sick, the poor, the unemployed. And the Labour Party, the Tory Party, the mini-me Tories, married to each other for better or worse, have only one message to deliver. One message: more cuts, more weapons, more misery. They're willing to hand £1.4 trillion to bankers, but they tell us we have to pay through closed hospitals, through slashed living standards, a future of unemployment, or working till we die. For Better Together, of course, they think this is a land of opportunity. It is a land of opportunity. David Cameron is right. This is a land of opportunity. It's a land of opportunity for the super rich, who are enjoying a massive increase in their wealth by an average of 30% to a total of £336 billion, the biggest increase in over 22 years. And of course, there is one section of our economy which is booming. It's the thriving business of food banks. The number of people using them on the account of being too poor to afford food has trebled in the past year to 500,000. Welfare reforms, benefit delays, a cost of living crisis have pushed an unprecedented number of people in this country into a state of hunger, malnutrition, and food insecurity. Wages are so low in this country that a full working day no longer guarantees food on the table for a family. Yet the Tories want to slash benefits for people who fail to get jobs. And when you go back to the question of Gordon Brown, who claims a vote for independence would put at risk, I quote, 100 years of Labour achievements, he seems to forget that during a decade of annual CBI dinners, the Chancellor boasted he'd done away with boom and bust economies. He'd stabilized the world economy. We should remember as well as Chancellor, he's the man who signed the blank checks for the wars in Afghanistan, for the wars in Iraq. He was the one who's messianic in his pursuit of privatization. And it was actually him who, as Chancellor, argued it was necessary to break from 100 years of Labour history to turn the United Kingdom into a paradise for big business. He out-Thatchered Thatcher, and he turned London into a playground for the super rich, leaving us at the mercy of the bankers. They remember it was Gordon Brown. And when we look at the question of UKIP, because it is an important question, when we look at the question of UKIP, of who energized the road to electoral victory in this country, we should remember that the first politician to raise the slogan, British jobs for British workers, was Gordon Brown. And it was him, in partnership with Tony Blair, that drove through New Labour's inhumane economic policy that bred ignorance, despair and fear, which gave Scotland Tory rule once again. We have an economy in this country, the United Kingdom's economy, that is dominated by the arms trade, dominated by the City of London, dominated by the banks, and dominated by workfare. And the unionist argument is this, that we will benefit from a security of a bigger state. Well, I'll tell you this, I would prefer to live in a country where our banks are regulated, where banks do not have the freedom to speculate on our future, and if these banks fail, if the bankers fail, they should be jailed and not bailed out. That is what we want. And I know that politicians guffaw at ideas like that and say, well, it's not possible. Why not? Iceland suffered a crisis. They bankrupted their failed banks, and they jailed their bankers, and yet their recovery is well ahead of the United Kingdom, according to the IMF. Now, last year, the European Union was going to introduce a cap on bankers' bonus, which actually, this is all it meant. It wasn't revolutionary. What they said was that bankers would not be given bonuses that were more than their annual salary or more than £1 million. That was the revolutionary thing the European Union wanted to do. What did the British government do? David Cameron decided that he would go to war with the European Union, that he would veto such moves, and he called a meeting of the European commissioners. And the result of that was no cap on bonuses. The level of bonuses today are greater than they were at the time of the crisis in 2008, when we bailed out the bankers for £1.4 trillion. Yet we have the same government who tells us in this country there's not enough money for wages, not enough money for benefits, not enough money for the disabled, yet they're willing to cap welfare, but they're not willing to cap the bonuses for the bankers. That is the priority of Westminster. That is the priority of the Westminster parties. That is the priority of UK Together, Better Together, whatever the hell you want to call them. So the next time you watch our Etonian millionaire Prime Minister, take a look at his front bench. Take a look at his 29 members of his front bench, because 23 of them are millionaires. What do they know about working hard to look after your family? What do they know about zero contracts? What do they know about low pay? What do they know about food banks? What do they know about choosing, making a choice between heating or food? And what do they know about people being punished for being poor? Now, over the last year, we have had a debate in this country about whether Scotland would be allowed into the European Union, but I now know this, and I think many people know this. We actually have more chance of staying in Europe within an independent Europe, within an independent Scotland, than actually staying in a United Kingdom that is dominated by UKIP and the Tories and the rest of the Westminster parties competing in a race to the bottom south of the border. Now, it has been said, and I'll say it again, I'm not one of those that believes that I've heard all this nonsense about cybernats, and I've seen politicians like Ian Davidson and Jim Murphy and all the rest of them complaining because they've been ridiculed or insulted. I'd say get over it. This is what I'll say, get over it. They talk about positive campaigning. Positive campaigning. People are angry. People are starving. People are watching their children not being able to afford to pay them, give them food, give them education, give them housing. People are absolutely angry. That's why anger and passion is part of this debate. And any politician that says it shouldn't be is a liar. And whether that be on the Better Together side or whether it be on the Yes Scotland side. And it has to be said that the No campaign, it has already been said that the No campaign are the most miserable, negative, depressing and boring campaign in political history. They're not just out of touch, they're also out of touch with reality. And if you want an example of how out of touch with reality are, well, we have whatever his title is, Lord Robertson of Port Eleanor, Baron Robertson, once the UK's Defence Secretary and once NATO's Secretary General. He said a yes vote would be a cataclysmic event, destabilizing the world, in his words. That was it. A cataclysmic event. It would unleash the forces of darkness, lead to the balkanization of Europe, it would reignite terrorism, and it would restart the Irish Troubles. Now, never mind the cybernats. If this is British nationalism, if this is the likes of Mr. Robertson, then that is really what needs to be questioned by our newspapers, by our politicians throughout this country. We should be clear that independence is the key to unlocking Scotland's potential. I want more for my children. I don't care. I'm not particularly interested in this argument about we'll be £1,000 better off in 15 years or we'll be £1,400 worse off under independence. I don't care if it's 1,000, don't care if it's 5,000, don't care if it's 10,000. What I know is this, that if we get independence on September the 18th, then the real battle starts on September the 19th to transform this into the type of the country that we want to live in, that we want our children to be brought up in. I want quality of life. I don't want bribes. I don't want 1,000, 50 quid, whatever the hell these politicians want to argue, because I quite honestly don't know how anybody can predict in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, because they couldn't predict the bloody crisis in 2008. So I want to conclude by saying that I think we have huge potential, and I don't have a crystal ball. There is one cast iron guarantee that I can give you if we vote yes. The people who live in Scotland will finally make the decisions that affect Scotland. Westminster will no longer have the right to dictate what we should think, what we should create, what we should produce. We will no longer be told that we cannot govern ourselves from warfare to welfare, from employment to foreign policy. We will have the right to decide our own destiny. And I want to live in a nuclear-free Scotland. One of the biggest choices we face on September the 18th is whether Scotland remains home to weapons of mass destruction or whether we take an opportunity to remove them once and for all. What a powerful statement to make to the world as its newest country if one of the first things we do is rid ourselves of the weapons of mass destruction, and instead of wasting money And instead of wasting money on weapons of mass destruction, we start to invest in our children, in our people, in our elderly, in their future. That is the type of Scotland I want to live in. A Scotland that stands as a beacon for human rights around the world, no longer backing illegal wars because we're told to. The future of an independent Scotland must be a means for a bigger dream. The ending of poverty, the ending of ignorance, the ending of inequality of opportunity. And if we do that come September the 18th, then for the very first time, we will be in control of our destiny. Thank you, brothers and sisters.